Yes, people, how are we all doing? Hope everybody is fit and well. In this episode of Prison News, I'm going to be talking about two different inmates that have popped up on my news app. Now, anyone that's been following the channel will know for the last few months I've been doing Prison News, where I'll be talking about what is in the highlights today. Now, the first one that has come up is Hyde Park terrorist Edward Little has prison sentence increased. Now, it says a terrorist who plotted to kill a preacher at Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park has had his jail sentence increased. Now, what strikes me about reading up on this, because I've just read through the article before I'm going to talk to you about it. And what strikes me is the irony in the name. He's a terrorist who obviously wants to kill a Christian preacher, and he wants to kill UK citizens. But Edward Little, you cannot get a more English name or British name than Edward Little. And Edward Little is only 22-year-old. He's from Brighton. And he was originally sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 16 years at the Old Bailey on December the 15th. But obviously when he's been sentenced, they must have put an appeal in, thinking that the sentence was too lenient. So when he went back up, this was on January the 4th, a judge has revised his life sentence to a minimum of 24 years. Now, when you get sentenced in the courts in the UK, you can appeal your sentence, you can appeal your conviction. Most people appeal the sentence, try and get the sentence reduced, but it works the other way as well. If the prosecutors think that the sentence was too lenient, the judge didn't give him a big enough sentence, then the prosecutors can appeal your sentence as well. And this is what's happened in this case. And it's been upped from 16 years to 24 years. And it goes on to say counter-terrorism police said the new hearing was held under the slip rule, section 155 of the Powers of Criminal Courts Sentencing Act 2000, which allows judges to re-sentence if fresh information comes to light. Now we'll just talk a little bit about the case. And Edward Little actually converted whilst he was in prison when he was a teenager. But it says Little travelled in a taxi from Brighton to Lewisham with £5,000 to buy a firearm and bullets when he was arrested on September the 23rd, 2022. He had targeted a Christian preacher who regularly appeared at Speaker's Corner but could have killed anyone who got in the way. Little pleaded guilty to preparing acts of terrorism in May last year and refused to come to the Old Bailey for his sentencing. 3 members of a crime gang were also jailed for conspiring to provide Little with a gun, although they did not know what it was for. Little settled on the plan after rejecting a mass gun attack on the late Queen's funeral in Westminster. Previously, the court heard how UK-born Little converted to Islam at Cookham Wood Young Offender Institution in Kent and at HMP Dearbold in County Durham after he turned 18. He downloaded extremist propaganda, including copies of the Al-Qaeda publication and Inspire in the summer of 2022, and spoke of his desire to get hold of a Mach-10 submachine gun, an AK-47 assault rifle, and encrypted chats on the Threema messaging program. At one point he wrote, "I don't think there has been an attack in the UK with guns, so a semi-automatic rifle would send an even stronger message." So reading that, he's obviously being caught through the encrypted phones. Obviously when there was a massive clampdown, or not a massive clampdown, when they hacked into these phones and loads of people that were using these encrypted phones, that was the downfall, because they were talking about things in the messages, and the police were able to retrieve the phones, retrieve the messages, and get all these people convicted. So it says Little agreed to pay a taxi driver £300 to take him from Brighton to Lewisham, South London, on September the 23rd, 2022, saying money was no problem. The plan was scuppered when armed police moved in to arrest him in South London. Prosecutor Duncan Penny, it says KC, but QC, had said Little planned to kill the Christian preacher Hatton Tash at Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park, anyone with her, as well as any police officers or soldiers in the area. 3 men were jailed for plotting to sell Little a gun. Tyler King, 21, Caleb Wenyeve, 21, and Reese Ford, 27, admitted being party to the plot, even though it was accepted they did not know the gun was for a terror attack. King from Lewisham was jailed for 10 years and 9 months for conspiracy to transfer a prohibited firearm, possession of a prohibited firearm, and 3 counts of possession of ammunition without lawful authority. Wenyeve of Buildworth Close in Nottingham was jailed for 12 years for conspiracy to transfer a prohibited firearm, along with Ford, who was jailed for 13 years and 6 months. After a trial, a jury cleared them of conspiracy to supply a firearm with intent to endanger life. So obviously these 3 lads have probably met Little in prison previously, and this is where they probably formed the connections, and they've been on the encrypted phones, and they've been talking about, or he's asked these lads for a gun, and they've supplied him with a gun, and they probably haven't got a clue, like it says, they haven't been convicted of it. They haven't got a clue that he's going to use it in a terror attack. So when these 3 lads are on trial, I bet they've been absolutely bricking it, thinking that they were going to get convicted of the terror charges along with Little. But I bet you any money they'll not be housed in the same prison as him, because I can imagine that these 3 lads will be wanting their exact revenge upon Little for getting them into this sort of problem, or causing this problem for them. Even though they're supplied the gun, they wouldn't have known that they were getting themselves roped into a conspiracy of a terror attack. But Little will have to serve a minimum of 24 years before he's even considered for parole. But I'll leave that story for there and move on to the next one, people. And the next one is, will I get the headline there? Scott's double killer named of one of the 10 most dangerous prison inmates in the world. Now, the one that they're talking about here, I've actually done a video on him previously, and I've spoke about it with Chris from up in Glasgow when I've done a podcast with him, and we spoke about this inmate. And the inmate, his nickname is Porky, and it is James O'Rourke. And it says he's unlikely to be released after he admitted murdering a fellow inmate in a brutal execution 3 years ago. Now, there's a series just come out called The World's Most Dangerous Prisoners. And the first one is the one that had Gary Vinter in. And I was in that episode talking about Gary Vinter when I met him in prison, and what he was like in prison, and what it was like serving time in a maximum security prison. So there's 10 episodes to the series, and obviously Porky is in one of them. I think he's in the second episode, which will be on next Tuesday on 5 Action. So get that one marked down and have a watch of it, or have a dig at it, people, because it will be interesting, because Porky has got a very interesting, to say the least, past. He's got an interesting prison time, and he's went on to kill an inmate whilst in prison. And he's been in prison for 31 years. So a double killer from Scotland has been named as one of 10 most dangerous prisoners. During a 31-year spell behind bars, he has appeared at the High Court a further 6 times for prison attacks accumulated an extra 35 years of jail time and a second life sentence. So Porky will probably never be released from prison. He's now 53 and he's still got quite a lot of time to serve before he's eligible for parole. But somebody who's in prison for murder that goes on to commit murder whilst in prison, there's a very small chance he'll ever be released. So the episode on O'Rourke, the second in the series, tells how both inmates and prison officers have lived in fear of him during his lengthy stint behind bars, and how he used violence in the past to cement his position at the top of the prison hierarchy. There are also claims he was at one time given his own special menu delivered to his cell because of his violent reputation. Porky has been behind bars at prisons across Scotland since 1992. He was convicted for murdering Neil Kearney, 32, in Airdrie, for which he was given a life sentence. During the violent attack, he was seen dropping a slab of concrete on his head. Now, when I've looked into this case before and I've spoke about it, and there's newspaper articles on it, there is people spoke about, or there is accusations that he's actually innocent of that initial murder. And this is why he's went on to rebel against the system whilst he's been in there. Now, I will probably do a more in-depth look into the case and talk about it on here. In 1997, he was then sentenced to a further 6 years after prison officer William Irvine and a nurse were held hostage at Glenorchy Jail near Alloa for a total of 19 hours. Porky was given another 8 years in 2002 for assault and abduction, then 4 years for a further attack in 2004. He was next sentenced to 8 years in 2005 for stabbing a prison escort and a senior jail official at HMP Kilmarnock. Porky, it says O'Rourke here, but I'm just referring to him as Porky because that's what the majority of the prison population know him as, and the majority of the Scottish people who know about the case know him as Porky. So Porky was then handed a 9-year jail term in 2019 after attempting to murder another prisoner at the same jail by slitting his throat in the gym. He received his second life sentence in July 2022 at the High Court in Glasgow after he admitted murdering fellow prisoner Dean Ramsey at Glenorchy 18 months earlier. Trial Judge Lord Arthurson told him, "You come before this court with by far the worst criminal record I have encountered to date as a judge." After choking Ramsey, he died later in hospital. Porky was then seen shaking his hands with other prisoners and later heard admitting to the murder to his mum in a phone call. Prison officers had found a bleeding Ramsey lying on his cell floor with his wrists bound and a ligature made from bedsheets around his neck. A prison source said at the time of the attack, "It doesn't take much for Porky to flip." Taking part in the documentary are people who have come into contact with Porky over the last number of years, including hostage victim Irvine, former police chief and MSP Graham Pearson, and ex-prisoner Anthony Gilty. Irvine, a former professional footballer, said of his 1997 ordeal, "I knew it was dangerous. I knew he was involved." He goes on to say, he said Porky has completely thrown away his life while in prison and has gone from someone who didn't have a lot of opportunities to someone who gave himself no opportunities. Porky could have got out years ago if he had changed his attitude and behaviour and been forgotten about. Instead, he has become a prison personality. So Porky up in Scotland has become what you could say as famous or infamous. He's famous amongst the inmates up in Scotland because of his fearsome reputation. Now, when you're in the prison system, everybody knows who the top dogs are. Same as down here in England, when everybody knows in the high security prisons who not to mess with, who are the top dogs. The same up in the Scottish system. Everybody knows who the people are with the most reputation. I've spoke about them on this platform, and I'll speak about them more because people find it interesting. But the likes of Porky, people don't mess with in prison. He's in there, he's committed these offences whilst in prison. He's become a very dangerous prisoner, and nobody will mess with somebody that has nothing to lose. And that's why Porky is featuring in this programme of 10 of the most dangerous prison inmates in the world. Now, someone like Porky will be loving this kind of press. Not that I know him personally, but somebody like this that is serving time in the system and has become known as one of the most dangerous. This will just heighten his status within the prison estate, and he will be loving knowing that he's getting this type of attention, and it'll further increase his credibility in the prison system, and people will not mess with Porky within the prison estate. And that's coming from your own personal experience by being in prison and knowing that if you come across inmates like this, do not get into altercations with them, because you will not be leaving prison alive. You will be leaving prison in a body bag or covered in scars. But I'll leave that one there for now. People have covered 2 interesting stories. Hopefully you're enjoying them. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. But I will be doing more of these stories every week now that I've got more time. The kids are back at school, because over the Christmas holidays, it's hard to get the opportunity to do these videos in quietness. But I'll leave that one there for now, people. If you are enjoying the content, remember to comment, like, and subscribe. Take care, everyone.